Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of NC-17. My name is Josh, and today we have with us actor, producer. I mean, he's pretty much done it all in the entertainment world, especially for independent film. We got Luke Robert Poirier. How you
Hi,
doing
John.
today?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's an honor, my friend. It's an honor. Uh, so before we get into everything that you're involved with now and kind of like how you got to where you are, let's go back a little bit. Because I know that you spent some time doing radio and stuff like that, but let's go back even before then. When did you find out? When did you realize that you wanted to do entertainment for a living?
I've always, even as a child, envisioned myself doing some sort of entertainment, um, but not as a living, just, it was just a passing thought. But it wasn't until I got into college and landed my first job in radio and getting paid to do that, that it started the thought process. That eventually led to a an on-air personality gig with that. It was a Christian radio station. From there, it went to a CBS-owned station in Tampa, Florida. On-air personality there. Um, that eventually led to uh, weekend gigs as a DJ, which gave me a larger in-person audience. Um, that eventually led into a nightclub DJ, which that was really fun. And that from there, it went to theater, and I did theater for a little bit. Um, then when I got married, my wife and I wanted to have a family, and we decided that our children needed to experience seasons. So, this is Florida, and, Florida has essentially two seasons, right? Really hot and humid, and really freaking hot and humid. So, we had an opportunity to come to Michigan, and while we came here, there were the film incentives. So I started work as a background extra. That eventually led to student films, which led to eventual representation with a manager and a couple of agents, which led to larger feature films and television, which led to a series of defaulted payments. And that was the inspiration that led to me deciding let's go out on our own and do our own films.
All right.
Yeah.
Uh, so you can essentially say you're a jack of all trades because I mean you can on a whim if you want to say hey I want to go be a DJ for the night you can do this and that to me is phenomenal because when you're trying to traverse any plane of existence whether it be normal entertainment or something like that you kind of want to pave your own path and you my friend seems like you have done that in strides and my hat's off to you so
Well, thank you. I tell you, my time as a disc jockey really honed my public speaking skills. And very often we'll go back and watch interviews and see how many times I say or or any kind of thing to buy time to think of what I want to say next. So it made me a very conscientious public speaker, especially in front of crowds where there's alcohol and loud music, and you want to be understood the first time. So that's definitely a skill set that had a lot to do with being able to improv my way through everything else.
uh, speaking of improv improv actually had something to do with your first thing on stage I do a little bit of research just a little but so kind of take us through that, like being on stage for the first time and just throwing yourself into it and being able to improv. What was that feeling like, and what did you learn from that, and what experiences did you take with you?
Um, well, I believe my first stage project was Bullshot Crummin.
Hmm.
And Bullshot Crummin is a British comedy where you have maybe six actors play 18 roles. So being able to change characters quickly on a on the whim really makes a difference. The other thing I learned is that it doesn't matter if I have hair or not, I'm going to sweat. And there's no, there's nothing I could do to conceal that. And so trying to work that into the storyline on the fly was something that had a lot to do with my early days experiencing improv. Um, but yeah, that something else too. Being able to improv on stage really allowed me to improv in whenever I had a job in sales. So being able to think on the fly, I think every actor, if they're looking for a gig or something to do on the side, do sales. Because not only are you earning some type of paycheck, but you're crafting your skills as an actor. Because you have to convey a sense like, you really do need this aluminum siding because, studies show that people without aluminum siding on their homes tend to lose their hair or, experience uh, children with web feet or something, so yeah, it really is. The theater had a lot to do with how I turned out as far as my speaking skills and improv. Now, theater people, now let me back up and say there is a clear delineation between theater people and film people. And I mean, no disrespect, but theater people are very gregarious with their physical emotions. Film people don't need to do that. But either way, it's probably good to experience both worlds at some point.
Okay. Uh, so let's kind of come into a little bit of like your beginning of getting into short films and student films and stuff like that, because I know that, just from the little bit of research I've done, is like you don't want to be kind of like stuck in one lane. You want to be able to do a little bit of everything. And it seems like you're doing that, which is awesome. So kind of walk us to the first time you were on an actual film set. What was your experience? But more importantly, what was your feeling being on a set that you are now going to be synonymous with until the day you die?
I was scared to hell. Let me tell you, John. I mean, it was. I believe it was Lee Martin's Midnight Hour, and the Midnight Hour at the time was, if you're not familiar with it's pretty much a knockoff of Night Gallery from the '70s, right? And this Lee Martin character even dressed like Rod Serling, the host of Night Gallery from the '70s. So I didn't know this walking in, but when I was in the waiting room and I heard these people talk about, hey, this what you're auditioning for is actually part of us. It's going to be on TV. It's a cable channel that will be playing this, and I'm started freaking out. I didn't realize, you know, I just thought it was like a short. I didn't realize it was part of a series. So I walk in and I thought I was off book, but I see Lee Martin. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's a young looking Rod Serling wannabe. And he's dressed in his, black suit and white shirt, and there were a few other people sitting around, and he starts telling me about the scene, and I'm sweating. I was just like, um so he says, okay, slate, and I wasn't sure what that meant at the time. So he was very kind, and he said, well, just give me your name and all that. I did. um and then I forgot everything. I completely I completely went blank. And I thought, wow, once I got through it, and they were patient, and they fed me lines, but for the life of me, it felt like I had no idea. I didn't know that I could improv. I didn't, it was probably the absolute worst case scenario that any actor would want to, or doesn't want to experience. You're forgetting your lines. You don't even know what kind of character you're supposed to be. So, but from there, everything got better. And a lot of that has to do, I think, actually, I know, the support system you have at home. You know, every actor, if especially if they have a family, if you don't have your partner or your spouse buying in and encouraging and supporting you and having your back, it's very difficult.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's very difficult. So, which speaks to why there's such turnover. You might start recognizing certain names. You see them, at all these castings. They're making their presence known, but then something happens, and they have to step away. So longevity is it's hard won. There are a lot of dues that get paid, and there's a lot of sacrifices that get made, and you know everybody has a line that they're not willing to cross, and a lot of actors reach that line sooner rather than later. So I've been very fortunate. My wife has been very encouraging. My children, my youngest is just loves what I do. My oldest hated what I did. So yeah, that first experience with Lee Martin was a complete bomb, and but a few years after that, I was friends with their makeup artist, Jason Hills, and he called me up one time and he says, hey Luke, this episode of Midnight Hour needs a monster. You're bald. Can I, you want to come in and do it? And I could just make you up. You don't have hair that gets in the way. And I thought, yeah, so I eventually did get my chance to do a Midnight Hour episode. That makeup that Jason did, I had an eye that was popped out of my head. I had maggots on my face. I was, I went home with that on. And I was driving, and I'd be looking at people, and they're looking at me, and I'm thinking like, okay, I guess Michigan, you see a lot of things, so zombies behind the wheel of a pickup truck is not a big deal. I get home, and and my oldest daughter, she, I could hear my wife. She sees me pull up, and my wife is yelling to my daughter, "Hey, dad's coming home, but he's got some scary makeup on," and she's screaming and she's carrying on, and she ran away. And that was my oldest daughter. My youngest daughter sat on my lap and picked maggots off of my face to help get the makeup off. Because yeah, Jason did quite quite an elaborate effect, and it was a lot of fun.
Uh,
So I don't know if I answered the question.
oh no, you did. You said that you were
Okay.
scared.
Oh yeah, and that fear, for me anyway, I can't speak to anybody else, but I know for me, it never goes away. There's the sense that, and I think every actor understands this, and probably every filmmaker as well.
Oh,
You're part of, you always tend to question yourself, like, you know what, I could have probably did this instead, and it would have turned out much better, or so on and so forth. So there's always that. And this, well,
oh. You keep freezing. Technical difficulties. We'll be back with him in 1 second. Uh, yeah, Luke, if you can hear me, yeah, you're completely frozen. We lost Luke. We'll get him back. Okay, can you hear us? Uh, I think your mic is muted. Hold on. Oh,
okay, how's that?
all right, there we go. All
Yeah,
right.
it just hiccup or something, So
It's okay. Hey, it happens. It's part of this world. So, uh, yeah, I do want to credit the person who kind of introduced us a little bit, because we both have a young actress working for us,
yes, we do. Oh
and
my gosh.
her and her mother are, and I'll give them definitely their props here in a minute, but both of them together are they're Batman and Robin. They're like a dynamic duo, and I want to say to Tara and to Jaslyn Hetler, thank you, because meeting awesome people is cool, but meeting awesome people through other awesome people just makes that circle grow even further.
Agreed.
Uh before we get into the film you have with her, I just wanted to give them a quick shout out because we will come back to them. Kind of walk us through a little bit more of the other roles you've played, and kind of like, because I've seen some of your demo roles and I've seen some of your detective roles. I mean, it, like I said, you do it all, so that's awesome. uh was there a specific role that you played that kind of like spoke to you on a more personal level?
Um, yes. There was one role that I really I really enjoyed a great deal, and that was um, the Santa Claus character in A Criminal Case of Christmas. Now, the writer director John Wisniewski um, wrote this elaborate story about how Santa Claus was visiting this home on Christmas Eve that was at the time being burglarized. And Santa Claus was explaining to the burglar, all the things that he could be doing instead, and he goes into this monologue about how materialistic Christmas had become, and that, these, it was an American Girl doll knockoff, but how, the um, Chinese fellow who assembles this is only paid $1.23 a day
Hmm.
in U.S. funds, and yet we have this item that retails for $150, and it's just it's, criminal and this and that, the other, and so on and so forth. So that whole thought process really, and you hear stories about stuff like that, in retail and all that, but the way John had written the script, and how he, had these pieces of information that were shared, it was just, it was really, oh, damn it, I said, it was, it really meant something to me.
Yeah.
Um, Now, makeup for that was about 90 minutes because of all the hair they had to put on me. I was completely bald at that time, no beard or anything. So the amount of detail, strand by strand, putting this hair on, um, it was that was an experience in and of itself. But the that script and the ending of that script, when I first read it, I didn't see it coming, and that's the thing that really, I think, brought it home for me. If you can read a script and then the ending is like, whoa, then that when it's done and it's done well on film, it's going to be a great story. People are going to talk about it, they're going to remember and that has had a big influence on what I bring to the table now, as far as what I consider entertaining. Because when you see a trailer for a film and you pretty much know what the movie's about, I think you've given away too much. There's that, and the fact that maybe this story, and if you go see the film, and it's like, yeah, it's pretty much what I expected because of the trailer, then it's very linear. I think
Hmm.
there's there were no risks. A proven formula was followed, and so it's predictable. You've seen one, you've probably seen them all, and so how do you keep your audience engaged to the point where they're like, what happened? What I didn't see that happening. How and they're entertained.
All right.
They're entertained because it's like they're surprised. It's like, and it's, I think it's a great feeling. You know,
All right. It's
I I think M. Night Shyamalan used to do that really, really well in the beginning of his directorial career.
Oh yeah.
The first few movies um, were amazing, but then he got cocky, and then he had an entourage, and then he was so full of himself that his following movies just started getting crappier. I mean, yeah, it's NC-17. Yeah, they get crappier and crappier, and so that surprise ending thing just kind of went off to the wayside. But his first few early films were pretty influential
Oh yeah.
in this regard.
Oh yeah. Uh, I'm all about a good surprise ending. I think one of the best surprise endings of any film was the ending of Saw
Which one?
Part One.
Okay, I'm trying to remember it, but what's coming to mind is the Wayne brothers parody of the opening scene from Saw.
Yeah.
And
Part One was where they were both chained in the bathroom, but then John Kramer was the dead body on the floor the entire time.
oh yes,
Yeah.
yes,
That.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. Oh,
Oh yeah.
that one. I think is probably the best one,
Oh yeah.
without a doubt.
Oh, hands down.
After that, it, I mean, the gore, the excessive gore. I mean, I think it serves a point, but when it gets to how do we get gorier or how do we get more pervasive with the gore, to the point where it's like, why would anybody stick their hand in a clear box that has razor blades and hypodermic needles in it in order to dig through it to get to a key that may or may not open up one of three locks that are surrounded by saw blades. But in order to remove that key from that razor blade lined box, you have to lose part of your arm as you pull it out. It's just nuts.
I actually I do agree that the more elaborate the trap or the trick is, the more you're going to get the gore. I'm a believer that if you want gore in film, it has to make sense. You can't just
Yeah.
say I'm gonna throw 100 buckets of blood on you just so we can have blood. You know.
Yeah, you and I are the same page. We're on the same page. Yeah. If it serves a purpose,
Oh yeah.
then that makes perfect sense. I think it elevates the film. But to your point, if it becomes something that's just for the sake of having a bunch of livers from the butcher thrown onto it's just excessive.
Oh yeah. So before we get into your projects you got coming up, let's go a little bit more into who you are as a person, because you say you got one daughter that is kind of like gross out by what you do. You got another daughter that loves what you do, and your wife is very supportive. But outside of like your core family, what is the support system like from your friends and coworkers and just everybody else who's around you?
Um, I believe it's solid and encouraging. Um, I go again. I remember the first time I told my mom that I want to make a career of this as an actor. And to her credit, she said, "Yeah, but you don't look good begging for food. So you're going to probably starve. Everybody wants to be an actor. Look at California. Everybody in California is an actor. And she said, you should be an accountant." Okay. And then that was all we really talked about. But I think that I believe that everybody that I affiliate myself with, in and out of the film industry, are supportive and they're encouraging. Um, Even if they're not active in the film industry, there is a lot to be said about knowing someone in some aspect of the film industry. I mean, to have a movie made in a community that does a lot for that community. I mean, especially if it's a feature film, and not to get into politics or anything, but you do a feature film in a community, and it becomes, especially if it becomes successful, you're looking at tourism opportunities for that community. You've got a fan base that wants to go and visit the sites in that community that film was shot in. You know, the local businesses definitely benefit, whether it's from the cast and crew coming out after the day's over to unwind, or they're being called on to do catering or rent supplies, or provide transportation, or any number of things. I mean, so somebody that's not affiliated with the business community or the film community, but is affiliated with some of the businesses in a community that a film's taking place in, you know of course, they would be nuts not to embrace the opportunities that a movie in or around that area bring. Because they're just, you crunch the numbers. It makes sense. The skilled labor, especially if you have to build a set, that's required. You know, local carpenters, electricians. I mean, holy cow! I mean, it's a huge plus. So whether whether or not they're directly involved, the fact that they're in my circle, I would imagine they understand that the benefit for being affiliated one or two steps away from a film being done in their community.
Oh yeah. So let's go into. I really want to talk about Waitress, but I don't want you to spoil anything neither. But because I know you're heavily involved with it, and this is also the project where you have Jaslyn Hetler cast. Kind of like in your own words, explain well, give a brief synopsis without spoiling anything, and just how you came about of casting just the entire cast and stuff like that, and kind of like the vibe you guys had when you were doing the auditions and stuff.
Okay, so a couple of years ago, a buddy of mine, Dean Lachuzia, who is also a filmmaker, we were we had just the night before, it was a Tuesday night, we were at the Royal Oak Community Filmmaker Mixer. And at the time it was held in Royal Oak, or I'm Star Community Filmmaker Mixer in Royal Oak. And we decided to grab lunch the following day at the Irish restaurant next door to where the mixer was held the night prior. And the purpose of that was we had started a conversation about how can we do films in a almost a rapid fire, low cost, um, and then just churn these out. Dean had a distribution path in mind, so we talked about it, and he came up with an idea, and and I said I would take it and run, and then 2 weeks later, I had the first. I think I had the first scene done, the first act in Waitress, and he read it over, and he was saying, and at the time it was going to be a zombie type of thing, and he said, Luke, the zombie genre is kind of like everybody does, why don't you do something like, oh, I don't know, Aliens, and it hit me right then and there because right around that time there was a NASA spacecraft had returned from visiting an asteroid, grabbing a sample and bringing them back to Earth. And with that in the back of my mind and what Dean had suggested, it changed everything. And what was supposed to be really a cast of maybe 10 and a rapid fire, create a formula and knock it out in a couple of weeks grew into a cast of 50. And it was no longer going to be a low budget thing because it was also right about that time that I got stiffed on another project that I had done, and that was like, okay, you know what, I want to do this on our own. We'll do this, but it became much larger. It evolved, and not only that, it sets this film sets the stage for a series that I want to launch based on the film. So it became almost like building a universe of all of these things that take place in this fictionalized area in Michigan, and that was the other thing. We wanted to stay in Michigan. You know, true, we don't have any kind of incentive structure right now, but I don't want to not film in Michigan just because there's no incentive to film in Michigan. Um, the the notion of going out of state just to save money, especially on a larger budget film, I guess it makes some sense. But I like Michigan. I mean, I really do, and I don't I don't see a need, to base whatever commercial success um, our films will have on whether or not there's a tax break involved. I want to base our success on box office numbers, not on a 20% return, if we meet certain criteria. And that's something else. I don't want to get on a soapbox, John. So please, forgive me for ranting.
Oh, you're good.
But the amount of paperwork that's affiliated with keeping track of what is required to get your incentives back, you, you know, it, our film Waitress it's registered with the SAG office. And we're going through the process of getting it certified, SAG certified. The paperwork for that, and I'm sure that there's a lot that goes into it. And so to add the notion that I want to get some sort of tax return or an incentivized return on, that's just holy cow. I don't have the mental wherewithal for that sort of thing. And unfortunately, I don't have anybody that I could pay to take care of that for me at this stage. So yeah, we're doing it in Michigan, whether or not the incentives are there. Hopefully they come along. That's great. But if they don't, it's it's not going to be a deciding factor.
All right.
I don't want that to be a deciding factor.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we continue, it's so there's a lot of things about, because like you said, back in, a couple years ago we had the incentives, and people were flocking here, you know. But once the incentives went away, they all went away. I remember you saying, I know I've watched a couple of your videos on YouTube. I remember you saying somewhere that the independent scene was thriving once all the incentives left. And I think you know, if you've seen some of the videos where I've mentioned the independent scene in Hollywood, like I ain't got nothing against Hollywood, but Hollywood has taken a backseat to independent, you
Mm-hmm.
know, at least in my opinion.
No, I
Yeah,
would.
they got the $1 million budgets and everything like that, but they don't have the heart. My
Mm-hmm.
opinion, you know. The thing about like independent film is passion, respect, and just a love for the art and for the people involved makes it more genuine, and at least in my opinion.
You're 100% spot on, my friend. You are absolutely 100% spot on because having 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 the freedom to be independent and not answering to a studio executive um, is huge. You know, uh, I think you and I both can probably name dozens of filmmakers who, in the behind the scenes interviews they've done for documentaries, mention how they were being pressured because it's been taking too long, or they had to take shortcuts because they're going to pull the plug, or you have until Friday to get this you know blockbuster finished. Like those kind of things, those kind of pressures. I can't imagine. what it's like to be creative when you have those kind of requirements that need to be met in the time frames and the restrictions that these studios are giving you. So yeah, I think independent films are without a doubt the are more entertaining than the big budget projects. I mean, I'm not going to mention Marvel because I don't want to get sued. So there's this superhero action franchise that is heavily dependent on special effects post production that is almost the same story each and every release, where something world ending is about to happen, and it's only the 4 or 7 or however them that can make a difference. And then the first time you see something like that, oh, that's great, but then it happens again, happens again, happens again. Well, granted, it's not to say these films aren't entertaining, because they are, but they kind of blend in after a while. And the performances are great, the actors are phenomenal. You understand why they're making the kinds of money they are, but is it making me want to stay up and wait in line to see the next one? No, I mean, especially when they start dropping trailers a year out, and it's like, this is coming in 2027. Okay, by the time that comes around, I know about you, but I'm like, I'm no longer, I'll wait for it to come on TV. There's no incentive for me to want to go out. But yeah, independent films are truly, I mean, it's just definitely the way to go. Definitely the way to go.
Oh yeah. So let's go back to Waitress, and let's talk about your cast a little bit. How you guys chose specific people to play specific roles, and just how all that kind of came together. Was it organically? Because I know you guys did the auditions and everything like that, but that those certain people you cast have to have what you are specifically looking for. And did you go through hundreds, thousands of auditions, or just how did you come up with the cast?
The cast was kind of a mix of both. Some were auditions, but I think pretty much everything else I handpicked, and some of the actors um, were selected because I've worked with them in other films, and I knew what they could do. Um, Other actors, I was familiar with their work, and it's like, well, I know Brian Heinz would be perfect as a father figure in this film. You know, um, the only, I think the one role that gave me the greatest challenge was the child role, and that was because this is going to be a union film. There are a lot of rules, and as there should be, as there should be. And at the time, I was thinking, I don't know if I want to bend that way. You know, I I want to get this project done, but I was talking to another actor, and she said, "Oh, you don't know. I mean, child actors are like adult actors, except that they understand." Okay, well, so for the child role, there was a cast announcement, and we got a lot of submissions. And I went through it over and over again, but I kept coming back to Jaslyn Hitler. And the reason I kept coming back, because in the announcement, I said, this is a, I said something along the lines like, this is a challenging role. You must be able to shed real tears. And Jaslyn sent, Tara, her mom, sent in a couple of selections from her her list of reels. And the first one was like, okay, yeah, it's fine. She's fine. The second one, though, the second one, Jaslyn delivered this monologue, and she was talking like you and I, but then it became very quickly, it became impassioned. And she started crying as she was delivering this. And I watch it over and over and over again. And I'm thinking, like, was she crying before and she just wiped her eyes? And looking at her eyes, and it sounds really creepy because this is a child and I'm zooming in on her eyes. But, I was convinced that, this was a one take, and that she got the emotional impact of the monologue that she was delivering. And and she was speaking. It wasn't like she was looking down and reading. And she was off book. She was off book, and she delivered this monologue, and it became very emotional. And I freaking, Josh, I'm hardcore. I'm bald, right? So I'm hardcore. I teared up. Brother, I teared up. I teared up, and I waited a long time, because I didn't want to go through this process again with child, especially child actors have to have thick skin as it is. They audition, they're told, hey, you did great, you did phenomenal, we'll be in touch. They never hear anything back. They don't know what they did right or wrong, so there's no opportunity for them to maybe hone their audition skills. And I didn't want to do that to somebody so young, so I wanted to make sure I did it right the first time. And literally, it was probably a couple of months after the submission, that I reached out to her mom, and we started talking. And then we said, before we even, well, I don't know how soon Tara shared it with Jaslyn, but I had an in-depth conversation with Tara about the material, because it was violent, lots of profanity, lots of gore, no nudity, but I wanted to make sure that that this was not going to be something to be problematic. The sidebar, we have, we're very fortunate to be working with practical special effects guru Rob Miller. Rob Miller was a competitor on the show Face Off. Mm-hmm. And on season 8, he led the team that won the season 8. So, and the show, what they do is pretty, practical effects times 10. Mm-hmm. So, having him, he's on board. He has a team of other former competitors on Face Off, working under his direction, taking care of all this stuff. So it was I was very concerned about Jaslyn's well-being, emotionally, on set. And in fact, I tell you, I love my cast. These are, we have, um, people new to the industry all the way up to veterans. We have, both sides, male, female. We have a great cultural mix. The diversity I'm proud of. But one of the things that I said in uh, an update not too long ago is that, especially when I announced that we have finally gotten this role selected, please be mindful of how you act around this child, because I know you're in character and all that, but please remember she's a child. And yeah, some of the personalities, some of the characters written into the story are very profane. But that doesn't mean you need to say that. And in fact, one of the conversations I had with Tara was, um, maybe substituting the profanity and then changing it back, using an AI voice generator in post. She assured me, and we may still do that, because I know another great bald actor, Samuel L. Jackson, when he's working with children, he doesn't drop those F bombs. He says something very close, and then they correct it in post. And it's when he said that, that's in the back of my mind, because I want everybody on our projects to feel good about being involved, as you do,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Because if they feel good about being involved in your film, they're going to do their best work, and that's what I want.
Oh yeah.
I want to take care of them, but I think of Jaslyn, or any other child actor, they you need to be mindful that they're still children, and that's a conversation that I had with her mom, and and it was. I'm glad we did. I'm glad we did, because we're going forward with Jaslyn, and it's like awesome.
Oh yeah.
She's. I'm very excited, and I'm excited about everybody else in the cast. I mean, like I said, it's a large cast, and there have been times when I questioned my sanity for going so hard, so high, so ambitious. But every personality in the cast is is interesting. I mean, the 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 conversations and hearing their character's voice in the body of these talents. I'm excited. I'm just so excited that I'm so fortunate to be able to be in contact with these caliber actors. You know,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
so,
It's. I mean, I'm right there with you. We got about 10 minutes left, so I'm.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no,
I'm
you're
sorry.
good. No, no, no. Don't be sorry. You're good. Hey, this show is always about the guests, so But the thing about it is like I don't know how much Tara has told you or Jaslyn's told you, but the thing about what we're doing over here with NC-17 is it started out 2 years ago as short story, you know, and then February 15th, literally at 4:43 in the morning, I woke up. I was like, it's got to be a feature film. I've never written anything other than that short story. I've never. I'm not an actor. I'm not none of that. I'm just me, you know. And then I talked to a couple people, and they were like, "Hey, let's do it." And I was like, "Cool." And so I started out with just 6 characters, and now we're up to 23 characters. So I was like, gotta add these new characters, more dialogue, and all this other stuff. But in the respect that you say that you did with Tara, talking to her, and kind of, I did the same thing. Because at the end of the day, you're right. When there are children, minors involved with film, everyone ourselves included, have to be mindful of that minor, you know. And I'm fortunate enough to actually have two minors. Uh, but the way it worked was is the character that Jaslyn's playing in Not There originally was going to be a 19-year-old.
Oh,
Yeah, but Tara sent me a message and said, "Hey, you know, my daughter is she's an actress and kind of wanting to do this, but she's only 14 going on 15. Is there any way you can look at her reel and maybe possibly change the character?" And I'm pretty sure I saw the same reel you
I
saw.
was just going to say, you probably did. Yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And me and the other person that was watching it, I was like, "Damn, now I got to turn this 19-year-old to a 15-year-old." And I was like, "That's not bad though, because now I'm a big believer. I don't know about you, but I'm a big believer that if you have minors in a horror movie, it makes it more terrifying."
Hmm.
And that's kind of like where my mindset was. But again, I kind of echoed what you said and what you did, and everyone has to be respectful and everything like that. But spoken multiple times with both Tara and Jaslyn, and they both they're excited to work on your film, excited to work on this film, and which is awesome because some people, especially out there in this world today, some people would say, "Well, you're competitors because you got something, I got something." No, this is independent film, and me personally, I look at it like this. I personally am not doing this for money because this is my passion. I've loved movies since I was 5. But at the end of the day, I want to be able to help excel people who haven't reached that level yet, or people who have reached that level. I want them to have something that they can also add on to their credits and just be like, "Hey, I've worked on this," So that's where I'm coming from, which is I'm pretty sure where you're coming from. So that's it's a respect thing. It's always going to be respect. But yeah, enough about me.
Yeah.
Let's go back to you.
Well, to your point, it really is about, if how do we help each other? How do we how can I help, Josh win on his film and elevate, knowing that because of who you are, you in turn will help elevate me.
Hmm.
If we're all giving somebody a hand up, if we're all giving somebody a platform to showcase their talents, they're going to come back
Oh
and
yeah.
they're going to help us. There's one, very, again, I'm so happy about our cast, but there's an actor that we have on board. Her name is Vivian Lee.
Hmm.
Right, so she's an active model. She's doing fashion shows all over the US, but she's also a ballerina and a concert pianist.
Dang.
She just started producing films. Um, she is, and I worked with her on another movie. She's amazing. She's always asking, "How can I help? What can I do to help?" You know, and it's that kind of thing. And I think it's probably has a lot to do with her first experience with me as just a producer and not an executive producer. Treating her with respect, making sure she was taken care of, and nobody, that she was safe. That everybody is safe, but there are she's a model, so she's an attractive woman, and unfortunately that can draw the wrong kind of attention. How do we make somebody feel safe on set? And I think, I know she felt that she was safe, and in turn the successes that she's having as an actor, on top of everything else, she's like, I'm still going to work with you, Luke. And it's that kind of stuff that really makes a difference. I mean, um, we have one role that is actually being done by an an active MMA competitor. Ashley Duncan is an active MMA fighter, and the role that she's taken on in the film is a security guard. And I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense. Originally, the role was written for a man, but none of the guys that I had were as badass as Ashley. So it's like, hey, and her husband, Ike Duncan, happens to be a colleague and a screenwriter and very talented gentleman in and of himself. It's like, hey, Ike, do you think Ashley would be interested in doing this? And he set it up and she's on board. And you know, it's like getting the right people and what kind of changes do you need to make to bring them on? Like in your case, you had a 19-year-old character that you rewrote to fit a 14-year-old talent. And, you know, I think that says a lot. And I think that kind of flexibility is only possible in an independent film.
Oh yeah.
You know?
All right. So we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So I'm going to give you the floor to plug your socials where people can see what movies or shows or anything you've been in, or where they can listen to your former radio stylings. So the floor is yours. Plug whatever you want to plug, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Reach out to me through Michigan Film Network, mifn.net, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all the other socials. Not all the other socials. I'm not on OnlyFans yet, but if I need to go that route to close the gap in funding, I'll find something that speaks to a particular group of individuals.
That was phenomenal. That came out of nowhere. I'm like, what? That was man. I got to use that line sometime. Yeah, but no, that was phenomenal. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
that's essentially it. That's essentially it. Yeah.
I want to thank you, Luke, for coming on. I always tell everybody that whenever you come on NC-17, you have a home with us. You're more than welcome to come on the show anytime to talk about movies, plug whatever you want to plug, or even just to say, Josh, you have a booger in your nose. I clean it out every day, though. So, but
thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity to get to know you. I feel like we're friends already,
oh yeah,
and I'm anxious to get together and have a coffee or a non-caffeinated beverage of some kind, and just chat and get to see what we could do.
oh yeah, we'll make that work. We'll make that happen. Trust me. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
oh, yeah. Everybody, until next time, stay NC-17.